That's the hardest part of these masks for me. All right, now I can see. I'm going to turn one of these off. Oh, then. How's that sound? All right, so we're good? No feedback? Awesome. So you read 17, yeah? And it never ceases to amaze me. 9.5 times out of 10, what we read before randomly ties into what we're going to talk about for the talk, right? I don't find it. Was it 17 you said? Oh, I'm on 7. I'm on page 17. It's like that was not the one, yeah? Yeah, thank you. I feel better now. I thought I was losing it. I know, it's right. Exactly. He's like, what am I doing wrong here? It was the Roman numerals. It threw me off. Right. Keep your thoughts wholesome and optimistic. Right. The mind is a powerful dynamo, according to how you think. Right, and what you cultivate. Well, when I was first given this topic, right, I thought it was gonna be about kids. Right, and in some ways it is. Okay. And we'll talk more about this. But what I want you to think, as it applies to what we read randomly tonight, is what do you think of when you think about a young child? When I was a parent of a young child, my kids are in middle school now, but when they were young, what happened when I came home? I had one on this arm, one around my leg, and the dog was real close to me, right? They're just so excited to see you. They're so excited to learn. They're so excited to say yes. They won't take no for an answer, right? They're persistent. They're always learning. They're always go, right? And that's kind of how this ties in. And before I move on, I just want to reference my sources, my references here, okay? A lot of books tonight. I learned of a new book that I didn't know was in English. My wife turned me on to it, but Leon Denis wrote a book called After Death, and there's a chapter on selfishness in that book that we'll talk about tonight. But this is my new addiction, is reading this book in the morning when I wake up and in my bed before I go to sleep. And we're also going to touch on some stuff from the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 8. This is actually item 2 from chapter 8. There's a question from the Spirits book in here, and then obviously a little bit from a small book called Pills of Trust. So we'll use all of those references tonight. Those are the pictures of the covers in case you're curious. And the chapter 8 is titled, Blessed are the Pure of Heart. Let the children come to me is item number 2. But item 1, oh, I thought you were talking to me. We're good? Okay. I love that mask, by the way. Oh, it's a new mobility. It's totally. You spun the whole thing around. It's a new spin on masks. It's like a major thing. I love it. So item 1 says, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God." And when I read that from a perspective of maybe prior to Spiritism, I would take that as heaven's restrictive, right? You only get through the gate if you're pure of heart, right? But we know there's a different perspective on this, so let's talk about it a little bit. This whole purity thing started, and the children thing started in this portion of the gospel, because there was a group of children that were being brought to see Christ. The parents or the teacher, I don't remember who, wanted Jesus to touch the kids, to bless the kids, right? But the disciples kind of didn't want the kids around. Right? They were pushing them off. They leave Jesus alone. He's busy doing big boy things, or whatever the expression was back in the day. And Jesus was extremely upset or concerned about this. No. Let the children come to me, right? It says, don't hinder them. For the kingdom of heaven is for those who are like them. Anyone who does not receive the kingdom of heaven like a child will not enter it. And Christ, several different times throughout the gospel, it uses children to symbolize pure of heart, right? Hence the name of this chapter, right? And we know that purity is inseparable from simplicity and humility. You can't be pure if you're too complicated, right? And you can't be pure if you're full of pride and ego, all right? So the whole idea of purity separates or excludes or detaches the whole idea of selfishness and pride. If you have any of that in you, you lack purity, or you're not as pure as you could be. So Christ frequently used childhood as a symbol to represent either purity or humility. So that's where the words come in. That's where the analogy comes in, and the reference to children frequently throughout Christ's words. So if we extrapolate that a little bit more, right? Like a child could read as anyone who does not receive the kingdom of heaven with humility and simplicity will not enter it. So humble, simple. Anyone who doesn't eliminate the selfishness then is not going to enter heaven. And we'll talk about heaven a little bit here, right? Because that's the question that I put in here from the Spirit's book. It's 1016. Again, as a kid growing up, I had a different take on things. Heaven to me was a physical place. Hell existed and it was a physical place early in my life. And then things like that just weren't rational to me at some point, which hence my quest to find something that made more sense to me and how I eventually found Spiritism. But question 1016 says, in what sense should the word heaven be understood? Right? Is it a physical place? Is it a destination? Is it a bunch of pure spirits hanging out with no issues, right? Everything's great, right? Well, what we know now is it's definitely not a physical space. It's a universal space. It's worlds, it's stars, it's planets. It's any place where the inhabitants of that physical realm or that spiritual realm are free of the burdens of material life, in the sense of the tribulations of material life or the anguish that's inherent to evolved stages. So it could be anywhere. It's not a destination. It's not one place. It's any place that's evolved without these tribulations of material life. And the way we represent this visually, right, easily, is with this graph that I think I borrowed from Olivia, who may have borrowed it. I don't know the origin. Does anybody know the origin of this slide? Was it you?
No, I borrowed from somebody else.
Perfect. All right. Awesome. All right. And I'm sure I've shared it with other people too, right? But this graph really represents that whole process, right? Pure spirits, were they created pure? Absolutely not. Right? Where were they created? In what state on this graph? Any different than me? Any different than you? Absolutely not. Created by God, tied to material, right? Simple, lacking knowledge. Right there at the bottom left of this graph. Over successive lives, thanks to the law of progress, thanks to reincarnation, thanks to free will, all these things that God has given us, we evolve little by little at our own pace, eventually becoming pure spirits. And that's what we're talking about here, this evolution. What guides the speed at which we progress, and what guides the degree of anguish or suffering that we might experience from the bottom left to the top right? What if you had to pick a formula or describe this in a two-part formula? How would you describe it? What comes to mind? How about that? Cause and effect, right? We are the masters of our own destiny. Is there a destiny for each of us? Absolutely. It's our evolution to become a pure spirit. The time from simple and lacking knowledge to pure spirit is driven by this. What I do today determines what happens tomorrow, and I'm experiencing what I did in the past. My thoughts, my words, and my actions, imparted by me, my spirit, in previous lives, in this life as well. I'm living the consequences of the effect. Make sense? It's as simple as that, right? All right, we can all go home. We're done. All right. So Leon Denis, in After Death, this book on selfishness, and again, I can't say enough good things about this book. Maybe because I've never read him before, maybe because it's new, or I don't know. But this chapter touches on selfishness. And I love how he describes this, right? Selfishness is the companion of pride and proceeds from identical causes. It's the soul's worst illness. So selfishness is not a choice. It's not a decision. It's not a personality. It's an illness. It's a plague. It's a pandemic, right? It's one of the soul's worst illnesses. Maybe, in my opinion, maybe second to ego or pride, right? Or ego rather. But they're all tied, right? He says the greatest obstacle to moral improvement, which is again how we advance, right? Moral improvement, right? The greatest obstacle to moral improvement is selfishness. And it neutralizes almost all efforts towards the good, making us unproductive. So if we're caught up in selfishness, if we're caught up in pride, if we're caught up in looking out for us, right? How can we possibly be productive on the good side if it's always about us? And that's what selfishness is. And I love that. It's such a nice way of saying that. All supporters of progress and justice must endeavor to fight it constantly. And it is a struggle, I think, a lot of times to not look out for me, right? Or look out for my family. Over the years, I can definitely tell you it's becoming easier, but not necessarily because I just flipped the switch. It's a lot of work, right? There's people out there that all they do is think about other people and they put them first, which is amazing. And that's the goal for all of us. It should be the goal for all of us. And when you fight selfishness constantly, you have less of it and you get further away from pride and ego. He tells us that we need to fight in favor of the good and for the truth. That we have to stand like a pioneer or a soldier, right, on the front lines, ready to participate in all great tasks. And that can be very simple things like you didn't do anything wrong, but you saw somebody do an injustice, right? And you try to fix it. It doesn't have to be protests and going to court and holding the picket, right? It's just simple things every day that we can do that when you see something that's not right, do your best to help those people in need, help those people overcome. And it can obviously escalate to all these bigger things as well, but it doesn't have to be huge tasks because you have to be ready to participate in any task that comes your way, small to great. That also contributes to new insights and enrich humankind's common heritage, right? We talk about lineage, we talk about heritage individually, but I love how he puts this into perspective of common, right? The common good, the common heritage. After all, we're all the same, right? We're spirits, eternal beings in an incarnated body in this life together on the same journey, even though it's individualized to us. Then he asks, how will we know when selfishness is gone, right? When it's eradicated from the earth, right? Once we're aware that we're bonded to all the other souls and mutually responsible for their advancement in bliss. And this hit me kind of hard. As you guys know, we're going through a pretty difficult time as a world and as a society here at home as well. From a global illness, pandemic, to violent riots and political strife. And we all in our own way gravitate or identify with political things, with ideologies, with philosophies. And one of my issues in some of this is I've been kind of upset at some of the violence and the cause of it. And it dawned on me reading this chapter that wherever I stand on the cause or the action right now, it goes deeper than just fires and violence, right? There's a deeper root issue here. And for me, this hit home in my understanding that, man, regardless of how I was perceiving this, the people in the thick of that deserve our love and our prayer and our attention, regardless of which side you think is right or wrong. And I hadn't necessarily made that connection on this issue. So I love how they put that into perspective. When he says, once we're aware that we're all bonded, your problem is my problem. My struggle is your struggle. Right? And we're in this together on so many different levels. Once we're there and I feel your pain and vice versa, that's when we'll know selfishness is gone. Then he says we will care more about their situation, their progress, and their trials than our own, right? Which is really what we're talking about in this chapter, right? In this talk, selfishness. When I put other people's struggle before mine, right, or at least put it on par, and I feel their pain, that's when I'll know that I'm less hindered by selfishness. And up until a week ago, I didn't see that. So thank you, Livia, for picking the topic and helping me grow. I appreciate that. All right. He goes on to say, right, that when we feel ourselves living in the others, we'll be delighted with their joy, right? We'll feel joy when they experience joy. How many of us have rivalries or competition? For years, I was a business owner, and I took pleasure back then when my competitor did poorly, right? Right? But totally the wrong way to look at this, right? Even if they're our enemy or our rival, we should feel joy for their accomplishments, for their joy. We will be delighted in their joy. We'll suffer with their sorrows, right? We no more moaning will we go without an echo. Their moans will not be in isolation. No more pain shall remain without consolation. My desire, my true drive, our true instinct, right, should be to help and alleviate pain and suffering. Again, there's limitations to what we can do, but our desire, our feeling should always be to help those in need and to find a better way. A strong, peaceful, and united great human family is the ultimate definition or the destination, and when we'll know selfishness is gone. When we don't have wars, when we don't have hurting or prejudice or bigotry or getting ahead financially at the expense of someone else's back, right? When we really look at each other like brother and sister and that we're one big family, helping, sharing in the joy together, that's when we'll know selfishness is gone. So how close are we to that today? Pretty far away. But I will say we're still a lot closer than we were 200 years ago, right? We are making progress, but a lot of work to do. Let's do our part, yeah? All right, just 2 more hours, okay, guys? I'm getting close. Leon Denis goes on to say, we are children of God, right? No one would dispute that. I think that's a common belief. Each one of us on our journey, right? Exactly where we placed ourselves. That goes back to cause and effect. I am totally where I am in life today, a sum total of my experiences. Each life, by the grace of God, I can return when it's time, with my intelligence, with my character, with my moral development, right? I don't lose that. But fortunately, I'm born or reincarnated with no knowledge of my past and my sins or my tribulations or what I did wrong to people, right? And I'm given the opportunity to build on where I left off, right? One life at a time. And as a result of this cause and effect and my effort in this life, I can either prolong my suffering or expedite my growth with less pain. He goes on to tell us that Christ affirmed that if our faith is the size of a grain of mustard, remember this from the gospel, that we could move mountains. Christ also affirmed that a being who trusts can activate infinite resources that were unimaginable. How true is that, right? How often have you found yourself in a situation that you weren't sure what you would do, that you weren't sure how to handle it, and in your faith you prayed for guidance, and maybe you prayed for an outcome that didn't happen, but you found a way through it, right? So when we pray and ask for help, we don't always necessarily get the outcome that materially that we're expecting, but we get that strength and that patience to get through whatever we're going through. I still have not been able to move a mountain, so I have a lot to learn about faith. But I do believe that this is so true. So when he goes on to say that when your heart's strength and sentiment are connected to the Lord's spring, not the spring in his step, but the fountain or the spring of overflowing love and joy, right? It produces strength and order. There's a story from one of our books that we read about a very bad part of town, right? And a woman was leaving her place of business and going home. and people told her, don't go that way, don't go that way. This woman made that trip every night to go home and to go that way and work. And there was a brutal attack that night. And the police that were investigating this, or the people that were coming to help, how did you survive? Did you see anything? And the woman simply said, no, I didn't see anything. I just simply prayed for protection, and my mentor helped me. And then there's an image of two really large spirits walking side by her side that were there to protect her. And the perpetrator of this crime, when he asked, why didn't you mess with her? Because she was protected. She had these two big men with her. So they were seen, but they weren't physical. They were spirit. So the point is her faith that God would protect her in those environments. She had the faith of the size of a mustard seed, right? And she was protected that night. So he makes the point that we're a generating force. Do you guys consider yourself energy, or that you have the ability to change the world around you? Like a generating force. I mean, that's strong, right? A generating force. Christ taught us that those who are faithful, regardless of how small they may feel at times, right? Often, he says, due to the arrogance and pretentiousness of others, it is very easy to feel small at times. People can make you feel small if you let them, or you let their words make you feel that way. He says it's very important to understand that we have no less value than others, regardless, right? We all started in the same place. We're all headed to the same destination. We're infinite and creative sparks of light, which when united with the Lord, become as great as the extent of the Father's will for our lives. Which is what? It's never ending, right? No limits on us. No preset destiny other than that we will evolve to perfection, Christ-like perfection. And if we can walk with that in our step, in our heart, in our back, in our muscles, right? If we can stand up tall and just really believe that, there's no limitations to how much we can grow each day. So how do we tie this all up? I'm trying to use pictures more than words, because I know this is important. So work with me on this. We all know that we are in physical form, right? We're in a body right now, right? This is our incarnate form. We know that we're we are a spirit from start to finish, eternal, right? One life after the next, and we're connected by this thing called a perispirit, that bond, that cord that links the physical self to the spirit. Every thought, every word, every action from this body, right, carries through the perispirit and imprints a cause on my spirit, right? And I'm living the effect of that today and creating the events of tomorrow, the consequences, the bills to pay, the dues, the afflictions that I will face as a result of my actions, or the bliss, if you will, the easier path if I make better strides. So thoughts, words, actions from this form right now, impacting the future, all connected via that perispirit to the spirit. The body changes every life, right? I die, it turns to dust. Whenever it's okay to reincarnate, whenever I've healed, I've educated, I've given permission to live again, different body. Does a perispirit change? No. Does a spirit change? Changes in the sense that it has the knowledge that's achieved, the character, the moral in each life. But ultimately, my spirit is my spirit, and my perispirit is connected to whatever body. So the body is continually changing. But all these other things are eternal and grow and keep going on with me. Make sense? Did I get that right, Libby? Did I pass the quiz? You tell us a little bit more later if you have to. Good. I'm always nervous when Livy is in the audience. You know? So how do we do this, right? How do we perform or change or practice or put into work optimal actions and thoughts and words right now, today, in this life, so that our spirit is impacted in such a way that our next life is a little bit less painful, a little bit less anguish, or we're at a higher level of moral involvement. How do we do this, right? Well, again, simple, right? Just be like him, right? It's that easy, right? Christ, the most pure spirit that ever walked the earth, visited the planet twice, right? The most famous one, the most accepted version of this is as a boy, right? Born to Mary, crucified 33 years later, right? The King of Kings, right? The Redeemer, the Savior, right? All these different things he's known as, right? You can't go a day without an image of the crucifixion or an image of the end of his life. And I don't want to take away from that, right? I understand that interpretation and the significance of that for 90% of the world understands that story. And many people live and die by that, right? That's how they interpret this. But to me, and I think what Spiritism teaches at its core, it's the way he lived. Not the way he died. It's the way he lived, right? Through every step of the way on what he knew was to come, he taught us to turn the other cheek, how to love his enemy, how to celebrate in their joy, how to console them in their pain, right? The man that put him to death prayed for him before he took his final breath, right? So it's not easy. It's hard, right? The point is, his example is written in the traditional sense. It's interpreted and shared by spirits that have lived before and lived during his time to share that interpretation or that perspective. We have got literature after literature of how to live based on his example. If we go even a step further, right, by the grace of God, again, the laws of God, right, that he lived by, that he propagated, are here in our conscience, in our soul. At the end of the day, we know right from wrong. If we simply calm ourselves and listen and allow that message or that intuition from our mentor, from our guardian angels, if we ask for that, if we connect to that, we'll find a better way, right? And we know right from wrong. So the goal, right, from my perspective, is even if we fail, right, several times a day, get back up, connect to his message, connect to God and your guardian, ask for help, and do the work. Just try. And every day is going to get better, and we'll string more good days back to back. And before you know it, this life, we're going to be making a very big deposit in our future by reducing some of the effects of things that we could have made very different choices about. So are we alone in this life? Absolutely not, right? We've got his message. We've got guidance from elevated spirits, right? We've got the Spiritist Center to assist. And most importantly, guys, we have each other, right? The children in us, right? That never says no, that always wants the answer, that is so excited about each new day, right? And yet also fragile. They need substance, they need protection, they need help. So don't forget, at the end of the day, we are eternal spirits, guaranteed to evolve at our own pace by our own actions. It's with the help of each other. I can't do any of this stuff on my own, right? I need my friends, my family, I need strangers. I need that guy that cuts me off on the turnpike, or the trooper that's pointing the radar gun at me, right? All these different things can slow me down and irritate me, right? I need all of that to grow. So I'm not the same person when I take my last breath that I was today. right? Constantly growing. So I thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you so much, Livia, for the topic and helping me learn something about myself that I thought I had gotten past, but I hadn't. I really appreciate the growth. Thank you so much. Thank you.